Welcome to everyone on the live stream to Talent Fest 2021. Feel free to add your comments and questions to the chat. I'm Reefer, Chief Marketing Officer at WiredSussex. Now that we're emerging from a year of lockdown and uncertainty, it's time to start planning the future for digital businesses. So how can we best connect job seekers, graduates, career switchers and returns to work from diverse backgrounds and from outside our Brighton bubble with rewarding, fulfilling work? Check out all the latest digital media and tech jobs on the WiredSussex jobs board. We're hosting a whole series of events this week to boost our region's thriving digital industry, helping businesses hire, nurture and keep the most talented people, the people we need to grow and deliver great work. So thank you so much to our sponsors, Legal and General, MPB, Plus Accounting, and supporters Make Real and Sussex Chamber of Commerce. We really hope you enjoy this session. Check out our website, wiredsussex.com, to see what other exciting events we have on this week. And I'll hand over to our host for this leadership panel, MPB's Chief Technical Officer, Sophie Davies-Patrick.
Thank you so much, Reefer. Hi, everybody. I'm super excited to be kicking off this year's Talent Fest for WiredSussex. And I've got some really lovely panelists here who I know will hopefully inspire you all with their experience over the last 12 to 18 months and some of the great things they've been doing, which have been successful. So we're going to start with introductions. I'll kick off. I'm the Chief Technology Officer here at MPB, which is the world's largest marketplace of digital photographic equipment, and we're based headquartered in Brighton. We have about 150 staff here and about the same amount elsewhere in the world, in Brighton and in Brooklyn and in Berlin. So that's us. I'm just going to go around my panelists here and ask them each to introduce themselves. So Bex, would you mind kicking us off, please?
Sure. Hi, I'm Bex Campbell. I actually work for a London-based company called GWI. We are a market research technology company. So we help to connect people with insight about the audience in the moment that they need it. My connection to Sussex is that I live in Brighton. I moved to Brighton about 9 years ago to work for a company called Brandwatch. So I only recently left Brandwatch, a Brighton-based social media listening company, and I've been at GWI about 3 months. So GWI, we are London HQ, but we're about 300 people worldwide. We're in Athens and Prague, we're in New York, and we just opened in Singapore.
That's great. Thank you so much, Bex. I'm sure we'll hear more about that career change later on. Emma, would you be so kind as to go next, please?
Sure, absolutely. So hi, I'm Emma Smith. I'm Head of Talent at Creative Assembly. We are a games developer. We're based in Horsham, which is just to the north of Sussex. We're one of the country's biggest and one of Europe's biggest game developers. We house around 800. Most of those are based in Horsham. We also have an additional studio in the beautiful capital of Sofia in Bulgaria. We have around 150 to 200 developers there.
Great stuff. Thank you so much, Emma. And Luke, now to you, please. Could you introduce yourself?
Hiya, I'm Luke. I'm creative partner and co-founder of the brand strategy agency UnitedUs. We are based in Brighton. I am representing the smaller of the teams today. So we're a team of 20, but we work globally with global brands. So we have a different sort of outlook than some of the other speakers today. And yeah, we're sort of a growing team. We've grown a lot during this period, so I'm here to talk about that.
Great, thank you so much. And last but by no means least, Liz, please.
Hi, thank you, and hello to everybody. I'm Liz Harrison Flynn. I'm a Group Technology Director for Legal and General, covering customer and employee experience predominantly. We are based down in I'm based down in Hove, but also in London. I kind of jump between the two. I have about 150 members of the team based down in Hove and a few in London and a small but growing team in Romania. So Legal and General are cover financial services, both insurance and investment management. Worldwide, we have about 14,000 employees, predominantly in the US, UK, and we're developing and widening our global ambitions, certainly across Asia and the Far East.
That's great. Really good representations of different sectors, different sizes of companies, and so on, and different career experiences. It's going to be a really interesting conversation, I think. I think the first question I'd like to ask you all, and perhaps I'll go to Liz first, is interested to hear what your company is doing with regard to the great return to work. Are you remote first? Are you calling people back to the office? Are you hybrid? Help me understand the decision you made in the UK.
Yeah, sure. So we're implementing a hybrid model at the moment where people are coming back into the office. Interestingly, our offices never closed during COVID, but obviously we had, for obvious reasons, very, very few people around. We're currently rolling out our plans for the future. We are making very significant investment in our buildings because our buildings, as they are today, are predominantly designed for people 5 days a week sitting in an office and doing the great things that people do. We're creating more collaboration spaces, encouraging people to, when they need to work, they can work at home, but when they need to collaborate with people, they'll be coming into the office. That's really exciting. Some of our floors have already been developed. Some are still going through the process at the moment.
Cool, thank you so much. Great to hear that kind of one of the larger employers in the city is kind of calling people back and using their spaces. We're taking a similar hybrid approach here at MPB. I think many of us are. Emma, what about you at Creative Assembly? What's their approach been?
Well, I feel that we're quite fortunate in games development that we were keyed up to ready to react to this situation relatively quickly. Kudos to our support teams and our IT department being able to get that many people out of the studio and up and working from home in 48 hours. Everybody was out. And I think really where it demonstrated to us as a company, but also as an industry, that we can work very well remotely, actually. It's not just about how we work, but we've released really successful games during this time as well. And it's turned it completely on its head. There have been some challenges around recruitment, thinking about how we're trying to do things before and trying to shoehorn them into what we had to deal with over the last 18 months has been a really interesting journey. So when we start thinking about 2022 and what that could look like, we need to spend a lot more time thinking about what works for one might not work for everybody, given that it's such a multidiscipline environment. So we're giving that to our leadership teams to speak to our employees, our developers, and understand what makes them thrive as a creative person, rather than trying to shoehorn everybody back into what it was, because it's not.
Yeah. Absolutely, and it's really good to hear that you've been so intentional about calling people back and kind of really designing it. And we're all really learning, aren't we? So kind of taking that test and learn approach is really key, I think. Luke, how about you from a smaller company? What's your approach been?
Yeah, so for us, we were massive advocates, before obviously the COVID situation, of the value of collaborative space. Obviously, as a brand and creative agency, we deliver really complicated rebrands for organizations across massive spectrums, from digital to print to internal culture. That means that there is a lot of conversation required. There's a lot of challenging required internally. We need to challenge each other. So the move to remote during lockdown, fully remote, was a big shift for us initially. We had intentionally not gone that route and worked very closely with our clients. And I think at that period of time, we are delivering global rebrands, which was done face to face. So we had to make a quick pivot without sounding too, I hate those sorts of terms, but quickly, how do we deliver that kind of face to face interaction? So we did, and we moved to new technologies and been really successful in delivering those rebrands. But it's been a real learning curve for us, and we've taken that learning forward. So we're now in a situation where our studio is still the heart of the agency. We work very hard to make it, a place that everyone wants to be, to feel collaborative, to come and enjoy. But also we're We've learned from the lessons that people need and want some flexibility, not just for their own, for their own well-being and mental health, but the realities of life are different now. People's protection of their own health, and so we're in a hybrid model. And to do that, we actually provide all of our staff an exact replica of their work environment at their home environment. So we've reproduced and essentially acquired double kit for everything. So it's a seamless transition between home and work. There's, we're not asking people to sit on their kitchen table. They log into the same systems. They have the same professional standard of quality, because obviously that's the major consideration for us in this remote working scenario, is that people can function at the same level that they do when they're in the studio. It's a seamless engagement, and that's working really well, and actually now opening up conversations for us about growth. We're at the point where we need to potentially look at larger studios, but do we need to do that? If we've got a hybrid working scenario. So it's quite an interesting conversation there for us at the moment.
Great stuff. Thank you so much. And yeah, sort of flexibility and well-being, they're also terms that I think people are coming up with in this new hybrid word as being really important. Bex, you're working for a company based in London now, aren't you? I'm going to ask you in a moment about kind of how that came about, but what are they doing in terms of requiring people or requesting people to be in the office?
Yeah, so similar to some of the other points raised here, we've gone for a hybrid approach. I'll just call out what is maybe slightly different about what we've done, or adding to the other points made. The main thing really is that we gave quite a lot of control to each team as to how often they met up. So we want people to be able to come together and meet and socialize and get to know each other and solve problems in a collaborative space. But different teams need to do that on a different cadence. So we gave quite a lot of control to the teams. Some teams say they want to work together once a week. Some teams say getting together once a month is good enough for them. So we've given them a bit of control there, and that seems to be going quite well. Similar to Emma, I don't know if I actually mentioned my role. I'm Chief Product Officer, so I run the product and technology teams. We were quite well set up to go remote anyway, because a lot of our engineers are in Athens and Prague, and we didn't collaborate with them face to face on the daily anyway. And so it's actually been quite seamless, and that's why the product and technology teams actually meet up only once a month, we decided, and then on an ad hoc basis if we've got a particularly gnarly problem to solve that we want to get together face to face on.
That's great. And I think, once a week or once a month in London is entirely doable for people in Brighton. I wonder whether you could have taken this role kind of pre-pandemic. It's, quite a senior role, Chief Product Officer. Has that been actually one of the benefits of the pandemic for you?
Yeah, I mean, on a personal level, I don't think that I would have considered taking a role this senior, and perhaps GWI wouldn't have considered making an offer to someone this level, this remote. So it's really worked for me. I love Brighton. I moved down here nearly 10 years ago. I don't want to move back to London. So this opportunity wouldn't have been open to me, I don't think, if it wasn't for this paradigm shift. Yeah,
the job market's certainly changing. And sort of on that note, really, I'd like to turn to Emma now. And I know that Creative Assembly, with the size you are, you're constantly hiring and so on. Of course, you've had to do that a lot remotely over the last 18 months. What have the challenges been? And more importantly, how have you managed to overcome them? What have you learned?
So over the last 18 months, I just had a quick look earlier just to see how many hires we've made, and it's close to 350, and that's not as big as some, kind of say with Liz, with the size of the organisation that they've got for games, that's pretty massive. So to be able to do that, it's meant that we've had to really throw everything away and start thinking about actually what works, and what do we need to change. That push for people feeling like they can't make those decisions unless they meet that person, in real life. That just wasn't possible. So we had to really spend a lot of time building on really strong interview skills and how to pick up on those body language cues and ask much better questions and elicit much better responses to be able to make the right decisions. And of course, being able to sell a studio and a culture when you can't physically show someone that. That was one of the bigger challenges, telling somebody how great a studio it is, and it really is an amazing place to work and the people are phenomenal, but actually you won't get to meet them for quite some time yet. It's been difficult. And of course, immigration changed as well at the end of last year. I dare say the B word. But that was a bit of a challenge in there as well. But you know, just really focusing on the positives and thinking about what we could do. Even programming testing, we use different software as well to do remote problem solving challenges rather than having them in the room. That was hard, but we did manage to turn it around. I think because everybody wanted the same outcome. You know, we all wanted to hire great people, and we wanted them to be able to be a part of Creative Assembly and the great games that we make. You know, it's a fun environment, and we make games that bring joy into people's lives, and we just didn't want that to stop.
That's great. Yeah, good to hear that you've kind of overcome those challenges. It was interesting the point you were making about culture. I also joined this company MPB in the pandemic as well, and I found it's really hard to pick up on that. So actually, I took my team in the time we could between lockdowns on an away day to do a socially distanced brainstorm on what our values were as a team, and we actually wrote them down and they're posted. So it means that now when we're interviewing, we can kind of make that a lot more explicit, and that's worked really well. It's also helped as well as we've brought people on to kind of understand like what sort of team they're joining. I'm going to turn now to Liz, because I know you as have a large team as well, continuing to grow. You can take us through your thoughts on this topic about hiring and hiring remotely.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting that really before the pandemic, we had started, as I'm sure many have, we were doing Teams calls as the initial interview step, and then obviously moved that into the office further down the road. So I really think, to Emma's point, we evolved that, the questioning and the approach and all the various bits and pieces we do when we're meeting a potential new member of an employee for the first time. The other thing we also did were where people had moved, either they were interested in joining us or wanted to know more about us, we were hooking them up with not their interviewer, but just a member of the team, so that they could have a fairly safe conversation around the environment, what it was like to work, the culture, the collaboration, the kind of not so good stuff, or the challenges that we might have. And that proved really helpful as well. And I think, the bit that I was really mindful of is the onboarding moment, the day one, how the kit was getting sent to home. Were the mobile phones arriving at the right time? Did they have the right profile on their laptop when they opened it up? And inevitably we had a few challenges on, as I'm sure everyone else did, because we had moved everybody to home working, and that created a few challenges technically. But those were some of the things that we were doing.
Cool, thank you so much, Liz. And actually, onboarding is a really interesting topic. Perhaps we can move on to that now. Luke, I know that you've also doubled your team, am I correct, over COVID? That's a lot of people to onboard, isn't it? Can you take us through some of the things you've learned?
Yeah, of course. I think just to touch on that, we have grown quite significantly during COVID, and for a small organisation, a singular hire can make a massive difference. Within culture and sort of tone of an agency, it's something that we are very careful and go through a very rigorous process with our new recruits to make sure that not only are we a good fit for them, they're a good fit for us, and it's something that everyone's happy with, because we're also mindful that when someone moves a job, they might be leaving somewhere that they're actually quite happy, but they want something more exciting. And there is a responsibility, or we feel particularly there's a responsibility on us to make sure that we're clear in what we're doing and how we're, what the opportunity is for them, so that it's a positive step in everyone's directions. But onboarding, I suppose, for many creative agencies, was probably a little bit flexible. We're kind of, there's quite a nice thing, a sort of culture within creative agencies to be quite relaxed, when actually onboarding in a remote environment, it should be anything but loose. It needs to be something that's quite controlled, so that people are not sitting at their desk when it was in the COVID period feeling completely lost and no one to really talk to. So we used that period of time to really put a lot of rigor into our onboarding process, really define, which sounds similar to you, Sophie. We wrote down a lot of our thoughts, our cultures, our plans, our what makes our processes internally really valuable. We invested in a lot of time to build a digital handbook that all our staff are able to positively engage with and add content. And then we had lots of processes. We did a lot of the sort of events. We sent dinners to everyone during the onboarding process. So we had food delivered to everyone in the team. So we all sat down and had big dinners. And obviously at that period of time, I was also with my wife homeschooling. So we had all the kids and the partners, and we had big dinners. And, we did lots of things like that to build the culture that we would in person. And it was really positive to the point where our team members who were onboarded during COVID, we all kind of forgot that they were onboarded remote. They all felt like actually we'd been a part of the team pre that, which was really lovely. So it's been really positive to us. But onboarding is something that I think employees as well are now much more savvy about positive onboarding. They've been through positive processes, and if they come into an organization and it isn't what they would expect, instantly they have a bad feeling towards the organization. And it's something that organizations do need to be careful that their onboarding aligns to what their goals and cultures that they're setting in the recruitment process.
Yeah, that's a really wise point, isn't it? There's kind of nowhere to hide, really. You can't. I mean, great to hear you've had some sort of some remote dinners. That's a lovely idea, actually. But actually, I was thinking as you were saying, you have to be aligned. It's not like you can just take people out for lunch and kind of make them happy that way. You have to really kind of make things explicit. We've also tightened up our onboarding process here at MBP and written things down that previously weren't. And actually, that's a really great asset for the company. It's something we could have and should have done anyway. So really, the pandemic's accelerated what we should have been doing really anyway from that point of view. And we also touched in your answer, Luke, on sort of keeping people engaged, and that's a topic I'd love to turn to now. So it's been a long time, hasn't it, since haven't been working in a kind of sort of the old normal way. And inevitably, there's been stresses and strains outside work. Of course, we mentioned homeschooling, and clearly there's been anxiety and big mental health concerns throughout the pandemic for myriad reasons: personal reasons, family reasons, health reasons, and so on. And we haven't been able to spend time with people we care about at work. So this, it's been a tough time. So I'm going to ask each of you, perhaps Bex, you could start, about how we continue engaging and keep morale high in that flexible remote workforce.
Sure. I'll probably speak a little bit more to what was going on when I left Brandwatch, because I was at Brandwatch during the most remote kind of time of the pandemic. So I found it a really interesting time, actually, especially for the team that I lead of product people. As product managers tend to spend a lot of their time embedded with other teams who are quite remote, but it's quite a lonely position. And I kind of didn't realize how much the fact they physically sat next to each other in offices was helping them. And then we sort of drifted apart a little bit towards at the start of the pandemic. So we had to really consciously put in time for them to connect with each other again. So we shifted around our team meetings. We put in an extra kind of 30 minutes, as much as it makes me cringe, for sort of some organized fun, like once a week. And so we did a rotation of who was going to bring something different each week, bring a game that we could play together or things like that. So that was like one part, was sort of, and I had to model that myself. I had to make sure me and the other leaders on the team didn't deprioritize it, because what was starting to happen is people go, oh, that's just the fun meeting, I'll deprioritize it. But then over time, people were becoming isolated. And I think that force of habit change was actually really good. The other thing that I'm a big believer in, and I was D&I exec sponsor at Brandwatch, I am again at GWI, is that forcing us to rethink our habits actually made us make things a bit more inclusive. So we thought about the fact that, because before, a lot of it was just go for drinks. And that's not very inclusive for some people. So getting together at lunchtimes, we had a lot of people on our team who've got children between sort of 3 and 6. So we got them involved a bit during some of the team meetings. Ended up having people having play dates on Zoom with their kids and stuff. And it just sort of, that opportunity to connect explicitly as humans, no work talk allowed, that was carved out during the working day, actually really helped with engagement and mental health on my team at Brandwatch.
That's great. That's some lovely ideas there. Thank you so much, Bex. Emma, how about you? I know that you've had from a larger organisation, and you've probably had experience of working with distributed teams and so on. But I'd love to hear some of the things Creative Assembly are doing to keep that engagement up when most of the people aren't in the office most of the time.
Yes, similarly to Bex, it was let's think about the things that we can do to try and encourage that human contact. And so we did see a really big uptake on all different types of activities for the same reasons. Again, also I'm D&I representative at CA. I lead the women's group. And being a parent of a small child as well, it was really challenging in the first lockdown. But just being able to have that time carved out, and the leader of the organisation, Gareth, who's phenomenal, a great leader, very authentic, and you really know that he cares about these things. It's always family first. Being able to have that time carved out where you don't feel like it's an extra made a massive difference. You didn't have the guilt of doing that, and being able to meet other people through those social activities. So again, I couldn't go to stuff in the evening. Also, not everybody was in walking distance of the studio as well, and we all had commitments outside of that. So having that set aside within work time made a big difference. And also we used it as an opportunity to refocus how we use our time. So we have focused days where we don't have any meetings, which I love. And we've continued that because we've realised actually giving that space for mental health was important before, but is even more important now, to just not feel like you're bombarded, and you can use that time for learning and development, or to get through that piece of work that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be on a meeting to be able to do it. So that engagement has come again from spending a lot of time listening to the leads of the teams, getting feedback from everyone. There was a time when it felt like the fun stuff, the engagement was dropping off from that. Because it just felt like it was too much screen time. So we started introducing a budget for people to meet up and have lunch when the restrictions eased off, and encouraging people to do team builds using their budget and being a bit more creative and wily with it. But it's just getting in touch and reaching out to people. We did a time to talk lottery as well, which was really good. So you just signed up for it. 20 people in there, and you just be assigned to just chat with someone and just talk about anything. And I got to speak to people I'd spoken to for well over a year, which I would normally see when I could make myself a coffee or go for a walk into town and get some lunch. So engagement was just remembering that yes, we're employees, but we're also a big pool of people having a shared experience, and to have that reconnection really helped us kind of stay grounded with it all.
Thank you. I love that time to talk lottery idea. That's a really smart idea. I think one of the challenges is how to replicate those things that actually happen offline, how to make them online. And it is that kind of just bumping into people at the coffee machine sort of thing, isn't it? So I like that idea. Might borrow that. Thank you. So Liz, how about you? Any tips and tricks from you on this topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of focused on a number of core areas. Interestingly, some of the basics. So making sure, for example, that we honoured things like one-to-one meetings, because those things so easily can get cancelled because you're busy. We did weekly group-wide team check-ins, so we'd bring everybody onto a single call every week, and just make sure that kind of day-to-day connection still happened. The other things we offered were things like we did the coffee drop-in sessions where anybody could join for a chat, which was really good. I think the other things we looked at was flexible working. Certainly when the schools closed, that created some real challenges for many people, because trying to homeschool, trying to do the calls. And so we really just opened up and said, you tell us how you want to work when you want to work, and that seemed to work really well as well. But I mean, we did really weird things, like we did virtual wine tasting events, and quizzes and all those sorts of things, non-work related, but maintaining the connection. We were sensitive to the people that were living on their own. We knew who they were, and just made sure we did some extra sort of check-ins with those guys. Those are the kind of things we did.
Thank you, Liz. That's great. And I think as everyone's been speaking about this, it's again come through about the idea that this is just accelerating things that perhaps we in technology, our industry being quite a global industry, quite an online industry, we're sort of starting to do anyway. We've just been doing more of them. Luke, how about you? How has any tips and tricks from you?
I think I was just going to add on to the previous point. It's just that I think that the pandemic has proven a point that employers should listen to their employees. Previous to the pandemic, it was very dictatorial of, this is how work is delivered, this is our process, you kind of fit within that, and this is in the wider world. And now I feel that's changed to come to a point where people are questioning, talking to their employees. You've all talked about great engagements. We've done many of those, but a lot of those come from the fact that, because we're a small team, I take a lot of time and effort, as do the other partners, to understand the families behind our team members. What are their stresses and strains? What are the things that impact them outside of work, because they impact them at work? There's no separation from it. And actually, the pandemic has meant that people are listening and changing their workflow. So I think that's been great. On the tools of that, there's just more tracking and visibility. I think people have been forced to have more, as I mentioned, rigor with regards to logging information, logging time. As an agency, we've always been very focused on making sure that we're clear. We have very detailed structures of time tracking, engagement processing, all those things. But we've also now got lots more documented processes for things like collaboration. We're using tools such as Miro and things like that, which I know a lot of people are, which are great for facilitating more collaboration. I think sometimes what's happening is people are hiding behind those tools now and are losing person interaction skills. So, from our perspective, the office is still incredibly important to us, because in person, it's easier to read body language. It's easier to read or if someone is not necessarily contributing because they're feeling uncomfortable, that can be hidden behind some technologies. But ultimately, like Miro has been a great tool. And also just like these environments, I know everyone dislikes screen time. We're like you guys, we've been working globally. That meant we had 6 a.m. calls and I had 10 p.m. calls on the same day, and it was very long days, and I would have a very sore back. But it meant that I've actually engaged with a lot more people that I would have had a short amount of time with. I've had a lot more time with, even if it is remote. I don't necessarily feel like some of my engagements are lesser. They're just different.
Cool. Thanks, Luke, for that contribution. You actually, I'm glad you sort of mentioned Miro, because that's certainly been a tool that I'd sort of heard of a little bit before, but hadn't really used in anger. And it's certainly something that I found is by far the best way to replicate the old in-person post-it sessions that we all know and love from pre-pandemic. And actually, it's an interesting question, really, about what we've learned or what new tools or platforms have actually supported us during the last 18 months. Bex, have you got any kind of new tools that you've found during the pandemic you'd like to share with us?
Sure. I mean, everybody's using Miro. That is one that we use as well. But the other one is Figma. So I think the thing that's interesting about Figma is that it's and Miro, they have collaboration at their heart. It's almost incidental in a way that they are design tools or whiteboarding tools. They are fundamentally tools that help you collaborate, and then they do this thing. They specialize in this area. So we've redone everything on Figma. And I think what's really nice about remote workshopping, as long as you do it, I think that it's about how you use it. Kind of to Luke's point, we kind of have a rule where either everyone is remote or no one is. So when you do a hybrid workshop, that's really a nightmare. If you've got sort of 3 people in the room and 3 people on the phone, it doesn't work. The balance is all wrong. But if you have everybody remote, you've got a hangout on one screen so you can see everyone's faces, you've got a mirror on the other. Works really, really well. You can do a hand raise system, so everyone kind of gets their voices raised. You can add things to comments. So it's really good for like a much more kind of equal workshop. And it's easier to do things that I quite liked doing anyway. Things like at the start of a workshop, you pose a question, I get everyone to just quietly write post-its for 10 minutes and then present, rather than just doing it as you go, because then the loud voices take over. It really helps to facilitate that. And what I love is at the end of it, you don't have to spend time photographing it and writing it up. It's like it's just done. I think the really interesting thing about how well Miro and Figma and others have done during this time, just from a product manager's point of view, it's really informed our product strategy. You know, we do market research software, but we want to democratize market research. And it's like, actually, we've realized we have to flip to putting collaboration at the heart of what we do, to be a tech company that helps people collaborate about data for us, whereas for Figma it's about design or whatever. And so it's really like changed the way we think about our own strategy, how successful these tools have been.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? The ones that really lend themselves to collaboration are definitely the ones that have zoomed ahead, for sure. Emma, what about you and your team? Did you introduce any new tools or make use of new ones?
Yeah, so we use a tool called HackerRank that we use for initial programming screening, but we were using an in-studio programming test when they arrived, so I couldn't do anymore. So being able to use a process called Code Pair, where we could record the problem solving session and have more hiring managers involved in that. That was a game changer for us. But I mean, it's not something new, but something more kind of understood more of the power it could do is Teams itself, actually. Teams really changed massively for all of us, going from something you just run a chat through where you could just send random messages to be able to use it as the ultimate collaborative tool for the whole studio. You know, we use it for our interviews, but also I use it to really keep in touch with my team. And the channel that we had for our initial team stand-up is how we all say good morning to each other and know that we're there, and we can pick up from each other how someone's doing, if someone's a bit quiet. We share our frustrations on there as well, and using whiteboards in there for other fun activities has been good. Honestly, big fan of Miro as well, being able to use that. I mean, who doesn't? But say Teams and being able to use that. And also Kahoot. I've got to talk about Kahoot, the little quiz platform. I mean, I think we're probably quizzed to death by now, but being able to use this way, I run a sort of a fun session with my team where the answers to the questions were things that they'd shared about themselves and their families and their passions through that time, so they could get to know each other beyond the job. And that was fun, and it was a really simple way to set it up, and you can use it with your phone as well. So lots of different dimensions of different bits of tools and tech in there.
That's a new one on me, Emma. Thank you so much. I'm going to check that one out. Liz, finally on that question, I know obviously L&G being a corporate perhaps has less scope for new tools, but anything you want to share on this topic?
Oh, well, I think my team would argue that they have lots of desire for lots of new teams. I think tools. I think Miro was another one. We were already using that before the pandemic, but actually it really came into its own. And what's really interesting, I go back into the office now for a workshop and we use Miro. We're starting to utilize some of these tools that we really had to use during the pandemic as part of our day-to-day lives. I think I'd also echo the Teams piece, that Teams was just something we had to use. And we were still using Skype, I think, at some points about 2 years ago. And now, we've sweat the asset in terms of its capability. I love the fact we can record, because when you simply can't make all the meetings you want to make. So, these tools have really just come into their own. The other thing that I'd like to say is that when we were doing software releases, which we do continuously, the teams were always based in the office, always in the office at 5 o'clock in the morning. And we suddenly had to do all this remotely. And of course, we could do it all remotely, but we'd never tested it. And now, of course, these things can be done very, very easily. So we just honed our skills, I think, in what we were doing.
Cool, thank you, that's great. And yeah, I think someone said if they'd got some shares in Zoom in February 2020, they'd be pay off their mortgage or something. So yeah, cool. Well, thank you everyone for those thoughts. I'm just going to have a brief pause now, just to let all our lovely listening audience, who we can't see but we know are there, know that if you've got any comments or questions for the panel, please could you put them in the chat box, and we're going to try and leave some time at the end to cover any of those. So we briefly touched on this earlier, and we're now going to turn to the topic of Brexit. Of course, the last 18 months has had a lot of changes. The pandemic was just one of them, but also the Brexit finalisation was the other one. I think, you know, it's been a challenging time. I think there may be differences of opinion on the call, or may not be, about the wisdom of that move. But, you know, given where we are, I'd like to look forward, please. And I'm going to speak to each of the panel, really, just to understand kind of not so much what the challenges have been, but really how they've overcome those challenges. And then also any potential opportunities it's opened up for them and their businesses. So Emma, perhaps I could turn to you first, please. Let us know your thoughts on that topic.
I say what my thoughts are on that topic. Like you say, I think we'll keep it canned for now. But you know, when the result first came out, we knew it would be some time for us to be able to work out how it rightly impacted the games industry, and it did have a big impact on us, particularly in terms of talent, because it is a global industry, but also we're very fast paced. So being able to access talent rapidly is really important to us. But you know, but past all of our personal thoughts and opinions, we really had to focus on, you know, what are we going to do next? How do we make sure that we're going to be resilient enough to be able to move through this? And really taking time to understand what that process meant for us in terms of immigration was number one, particularly for our employees who are EU citizens at the time. That, you know, what impact would it have for them? So being that great source of absolute truth and knowing what they needed to do next, and help them understand how it would impact them, work their way through it. But then also for people who were coming in to the UK, you know, we did see a bit of a drop with that. But then it has sort of started coming back, even though, you know, we've had all the COVID stuff to work through as well. So they have that has been difficult for us. You know, for a lot of smaller companies, it is it's a financial decision, and you decide whether you hire people who are, you know, not quite the talent that you envisaged in the first place, and bring people on so that you can move your product forward, or do you just keep waiting and, you know, take the financial hit on it? But one thing that has changed, that has made the difference, is the mechanism in which you could apply for a visa. Before, you had to wait until key dates in a month for visas to be looked at and certificates of sponsorship, and then that would elongate that process. That isn't the case anymore. It's you just submit their application and it can turn it around relatively quickly. We have seen some EU visas go through, settlement schemes go through in a matter of days, even weeks. It is weeks at the moment because of the sheer volume. But we are seeing international visas actually coming in much quicker. And then we can start planning to help relocate them into the UK. And it just takes that stress away, knowing that it can happen a little bit quicker. They're not just there hanging and just waiting for that to happen. So that's the bit of the trade-off that we've had with it. It's been a challenge, but say we focused really hard on understanding what did it mean to us and how can we make it work, rather than lamenting on the other stuff.
Cool. Thank you so much, Emma. And yeah, really interesting point you made there on visas. I'm going to turn to Liz in a moment, who's I know got some experience of having a team in Romania. Before we turn to you, Liz, though, I just wanted to share our experience here at MPB. So we had long planned to expand from our 2 localities in Brighton and New York into Europe. And we had to accelerate those plans as a result of the Brexit changes. We buy and sell cameras, and it would just, looking into it, it just would have been far too complex to buy and sell from countries in Europe when we were based over here in Brighton. So we actually had to open a warehouse in Berlin a year ago now, it was actually. It's interesting because that has been way more successful than perhaps we could even have dared hope. So although it's definitely been complicated with regard to all the issues we've been hearing about with talent, in some ways as a business it has opened up opportunities for MPB, perhaps unforeseen. But yeah, I wouldn't say that it's been a net positive overall so far, but certainly that opportunity was there. So Liz, I think as we mentioned, you've had a team for quite some time in Romania, haven't you? So how's that all now going with Brexit?
Yeah, I mean, we operate with a partner out in Romania in terms of a nearshoring model, and that started about 4 years ago and has been highly successful. Really, in terms of practicalities of Brexit, the only real challenge we've had is getting kit out to Romania, where it seems to have got stuck at various customs points en route. And we've obviously taken steps to mitigate that moving forwards, but it was just sort of things we hadn't anticipated might have been a problem that became a bit of a problem. But we've managed to overcome that, and those teams are growing. On the kind of broader team front, we did have a number of colleagues that were from Europe in terms of their home location, and they chose to leave home and go home, and so that created some other vacancies that we needed to fill. But generally, that was the main challenge which we've been able to overcome.
Cool, thank you, Liz. Yeah, kit, of course, that has been one of the other unforeseen experiences of the last 12 to 18 months. Kind of hard to figure out which of the 2 major events have impacted that, but yes, it's definitely lead times on kit has definitely been one of the challenges, hasn't it? And yeah, having spares and getting organized and so on. Cool. So yeah, Bex, how about you? What's been your experience? Any learnings with regard to particularly Brexit?
Yeah, so again, because I've changed role partway through this, I haven't seen any of this through, but there was a trend in conversations I've had in both places, which was that kind of the combination of Brexit and COVID has made a lot of our, especially at Brandwatch, a lot of our kind of European or EU resident in the UK employees think about moving home, right? They're like, okay, now I can work from anywhere. I don't want to have to do the visa thing. The pandemic's changed things. I'm going to move home, which in theory is absolutely fine. But one of the challenges is a sort of a scale up, and it's probably a bit different for Brandwatch now. They've been bought by a large global company, Cision. But at the time, we were talking about how do we support that from a HR perspective? Because we don't have legal entities in all of these countries. We can't pay you legally in these countries, and we weren't kind of ready to scale that fast to all of those different countries and all of the different kind of things that we need to do there. So again, this isn't something that I saw through, and I don't know where they're at now, but looking more and more at the possibility of those kind of outsourcing companies that you could use to sort of pay to do that on a global level. What impact does that have on your wage bill? It changes your on costs quite a lot. So that was one of the conversations we were having, is how do you as a smaller company or a scale-up company kind of just deal with that legal and HR part of the fact that your really great people might want to move to another country, which is fine tech-wise and all of that we've been talking about, but it just brings in that extra consideration.
Cool, thank you, Bex. And Luke, finally, did you have anything to share, particularly on the topic of Brexit?
I think I totally echo Bex's comment. We had, as I mentioned, small changes in our team make big impacts, and a number of our team did want to move back to Europe, and we couldn't facilitate that for them. Not that we didn't want them. We'd invested a lot of time and effort and personal sort of ambition into them, and they also didn't want to leave, but there was no facility, and also the vagary made it just too difficult on both sides. Yeah. So I think Brexit, for a lot of its negatives, will expedite our discussions about moving, a base into Europe. We work 2/3 of our businesses outside the UK. So for us at the moment, the sort of travel restrictions are kind of glossing over probably some of the things that we need to deal with regards to how do we get out and see those people in more detail. So I think it's a positive. It will be in somewhat that will be a positive, that it will drive change faster, much like with you guys in MPV, with your Berlin locations. You kind of have to respond, but that could be seen as a good thing. So I think there's opportunity there, and there's opportunity to make an impact and look more globally as a company. To look outside of our country and be like, no, there is great things, and why would we move to a certain location? What is it that place offers that Brighton or London doesn't offer? So I think there is real positives to be taken to it.
Cool, thanks Luke, thank you. Yeah, definitely. I think the next 18 months are going to be very interesting on that kind of topic. So thank you to those in the audience who were asking questions. I'd like to take first of all the question that we've seen from Julie, who's a freelancer. Hi Julie. I wonder if any of the panel would like to speak on mental health, how you're dealing with your own, managing it within your teams right now, and maybe how younger people or junior members of the teams are coping, and are maybe struggling more. So Bex, I know you said you had something to say on the topic.
Yeah, sure. So it's definitely, I think mental health at work has been something that I've cared about for a long time, even sort of before this, and this has just shifted it a little bit. But there's various things that we've tried in both places that I've worked during this time. So we just try to encourage sort of safe sharing spaces to talk about it, and particularly encourage senior people to talk about it. My personal kind of story through this, through the pandemic, is I also got divorced during that time and lived on my own for the first time in my life during lockdown, and so that was really challenging. I had to take some time out to sort of look after my own mental health, and I tried to at the same time use that as an example to my team, to show them that no one, no matter how senior on the team, is completely indispensable. There's enough resilience in the system that if you need to take some time out, you can take some time out, and sort of facilitate sharing sessions around that. We've done a bunch of things, also more on the kind of the technology provision side of things. At GWI, we're using a company called Spill, who helped to provide sort of counselling services, and we had some similar kind of employee services at Brandwatch. I think the point on young people is really interesting, and again, speaking as someone who, I'm not that young, but I lived on my own for the first time, so I had a big life change during that. The loneliness aspect is quite severe, and I think sometimes I had to sort of remind, trying to help to be a voice for some of those people, because where I'm sitting in quite a comfortable home office with a good standing desk set up, a lot of people were sat in their bedrooms, or like around the table of their share house, or maybe living in not very nice environments, and having to kind of manage that. And I think that just you can't fix it necessarily for them overnight. I love what Luke was saying about providing the right equipment, but just being mindful of it and kind of being flexible to that in the way that you plan things as a manager is something that we try to do.
Cool, thank you. Emma, I know you had something to add into this topic as well, please.
Yeah, so from my perspective as a lead, I adore my team. They're amazing. They're all at varying different life stages, and they've all got different circumstances, right? And that's kind of leaning into what Bex said, is that really taking the time to listen to them and pick up on the things that they're not telling you about how they're feeling and how they are with their mental health, and really just keep saying that it's okay for you to not be happy right now. You're allowed to feel like that. Don't feel like you have to justify, trying to be positive all the time. It's just untenable. No one can really live like that. And I think that I was still seeing a lot where people weren't asking for help, and they weren't really saying with how they were feeling, how they were getting on. And say in this scenario, they say it just gave me a unique insight into what their family setup was like, what their home was like. Even some of the young people that we work with the Legacy Project, which is our education outreach program, which I spearhead with that, knowing that they were kids that were probably going to fail their course, or fail the university course because they didn't have access to technology, was just heartbreaking, especially when we're in a tech company, and we sorry, old laptops, just because, you know, they're not running quite as fast. But for them, it could be a real lifeline in terms of social connectivity as well as their education. So being able to see all those different aspects helps me be even more empathetic. But in part of doing that, then I was empathizing so hard that I couldn't do anything for them. It almost broke me, and it really drained my own battery to the point where, you know, you're trying to make a phone call and you've got 1% left on your phone. At what point do you stop and pull back and start looking after yourself? And that's where self-care became something beyond, you know, taking some time out for a spa day, but actually just sitting on the sofa with your family and relaxing and trying to switch off, but also making really good use of counselling services. You know, I think that we're really fortunate to have access to, you know, employee assistance programme, but also the organisation arranged to have access to Horsham counselling services as well, where you could talk to them about anything and know that it's a real safe space. And sometimes you want to talk to somebody not because you want them to do anything, you just want to talk to someone who understands and for it to go somewhere rather than holding on to it. So I went from thrive to survive in 2020, and I had moments in my life where it was hard. Also divorced previously, remarried, but you know, using all those I call them like mental cookies. You have all those hard times and they go into a big giant cookie jar, and you use them when things get hard so you can move forward, but also you can loan them out to other people and give them a bit of a hand as well. I kept on hearing the saying, you know, we're all in the same boat. Right. We're not in the same boat. We're on the same ocean. We're in different boats and we're taking our own journeys here, and being kind and empathetic to yourself and to others is important, equal measure, whether that's in life or as a leader of a team. It is incredibly difficult. I feel like I've been tested to the max, but we're coming out the other side of this now, and I feel a much more rounded lead as a result of it.
Thank you so much, Emma, for sharing that. And, you know, Emma and Bex, thank you for both sort of sharing information about your personal life, because really, particularly when we're stuck at home, but I think anyway, you know, really, we can't separate these things, can we? I think one thing in the last 18 months is it's been even harder on leaders, because not only do you want to support your team, you're a leader because you care about your team, and you get professional and personal satisfaction out of supporting and developing people. That's why you do that job. So you want to do that, but of course you have your own things going on as well during this time. So I think it's been, you know, it's been a really tough time, for different reasons at all levels of the teams. Luke, how about you? You know, what's your experiences on mental health, and particularly how you supported people in your organisation?
Yeah, I think, you know, it's an incredibly important topic. You know, I'm really pleased that it's come to the fore in the last 2 years. You know, it's been given the platform to be discussed because of the situation we're in, and rightly so. I think, you know, it wasn't a topic that has only just come to be required to discuss. It's just something that was pushed under the carpet. But for us, creative industries particularly I think a lot of people forget that when you share an idea, you're sharing a piece of yourself, and it's quite a hard thing to be in when you're constantly getting feedback on essentially a piece of you that you're putting out there. That's quite challenging. There's no right or wrong answer as well. Like, you know, there is the right thing to solve a problem, but ultimately it's a conversation. So that's really hard, and remotely that's even more challenging if the feedback was quite cold. You know, Slack is great, has some perfect things, but it can also be quite a misread communication tool. You know, like a text message misread. It's quite easy to have happened. So we take wellbeing really, really seriously, and weirdly decided to go through the Great Place to Work scheme award during the lockdown pandemic, which was great. And we won an award for our well-being for a small company, and I think that's because we care. I think that's just, we care. Like, we care about everyone who works for us, therefore we try and make changes. And during the pandemic and now, we've always set a rule that you don't work more hours than you have to. It's not a badge of honor to be, I'm at the office till 11 o'clock at night, 10. That's not that's an issue on our side. You're either overworked, or you're being given the wrong work, or you're wrongly briefed, or you're not supported. That isn't a badge of honor. I know a lot of people who fall out of the big London agencies who come to us like, well, you're going home at 6 o'clock. It's like, yeah, like, it's okay. You're allowed a life. Like, this is, if you're doing more than that, you can't be doing what you're doing in the office well. And that started to creep in the pandemic, what I started to call ghost hours. I noticed people would pop up on Slack at 8:30, 9 o'clock, and I'm like, I'm there, and unfortunately, that's part of sometimes running a business, is I'm in and out a lot, and it's the team. But if I see someone pop up online at that time of light, I'm like, well, why are you here? What are you doing? And people would be like, oh, the kids were sick, and I needed to work late. And I'm like, okay, those ghost hours rack up, and people become burnt out, and they were becoming burnt out. So we decided to take the decision very quickly in the middle of this year to be like, no, we're going to go to a 4-day week for a period of time. Not because we wanted to be sort of evangelists, but we were like, everyone's done that many hours. We owe them that time back. Everyone's ghost hours at least that many days. And we did a 4-day week. Everyone does a 4-day week at the same time, Monday to Thursday, Fridays off, so that it's actually a day off. We communicated to all our clients. We talked to all our clients about it. And there was no allowance to be like, oh, I'm just popping in for a meeting, or we were closed. You got 3-day weekends. And it was an intentional thing for our staff to reconnect with their families in a healthy way, to be like, let's go out. We did it during the summer holidays. So obviously some people have kids, some don't, but we're like, you guys can all just reconnect with your lives a little bit and get back to doing what you're into. During the lockdown, a lot of people stopped their hobbies. Unless your hobby was confined to the space that you live, it was very challenging to do that. So we incentivized the team to come back and share their stories of what they did and what did they get up to on their Friday. So we had people going for adventures or beach adventures or museums, and it was a really positive thing for our business. And when checking in with our team afterwards, the team, I think, were genuinely they couldn't believe how much more refreshed they were by just having some time. And I think that can be forgotten, and we can always prioritize. Maybe it's easy to prioritize clients when actually for us, our focus is on my team. They're my priority. Without them, I can't do anything for a client well. And that conversation is really important. And I'm glad that that's coming more to the fore in all of these conversations. Obviously, everyone's really impassioned about their workforce in this call. That isn't the case everywhere. We have to be mindful that this is an echo chamber of shared things to a degree, but we need to have that conversation loudly to be like, no, that people are better when they are rested, or they're considered, or they have time. So yeah, it's really important to us as an agency, but also just as people. I think we should all be taking more time to have some downtime and stop this conversation of side hustles, and you're not a real business person if you haven't got 38 different side projects and you're doing this on it. It's like, or you could just be good at what you do and be happy. I
love that. Ghost hours. I've not heard that before, Luke. Thank you for introducing me to a new topic. And yeah, well done for looking after your team. Absolutely. Liz, I'll turn to you finally on this important topic. What have you guys?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, just it's just so great to hear that, just talking about this kind of subject, how everybody is kind of focused on that, and the value that how people have been as leaders in those difficult times is just coming through. And I think we have a term, it's okay to not be okay. It's one of my leaders' comments that he constantly refers to. And I think that's held good even as we've come out of lockdown. But some of the things, just to build on, that we did during lockdown to help, I touched on it earlier, around the flexible working, which we still we still offer that today. But the other thing that was interesting, we had a lot of people living on their own who didn't want to be on their own. So what they, we arranged, through various means and approvals and social distancing, that we had a few people back in the office who simply wanted to be back in the office, and from a well-being perspective was a really, really important thing for them. And that helped enormously those individuals. And as we've come out of lockdown, they've been the evangelists that have said, you know, it's okay, come back in the office, it's all safe and it's all good. I think the other thing also, we have mental health officers within our teams. These are voluntary roles that we provide training to, and they have been absolutely brilliant in, you know, people reaching out to them. Everybody knows who they are, confidential conversations, but actually have just been another area of support that we've been able to provide. We've run many wellbeing drop-in sessions where people can just come and listen to experts talking about how to deal with certain situations, and those were equally helpful. But actually, this is wider than sort of the pandemic. I think the pandemic just focused us on those particular challenges, but this is a day-to-day, everyday thing, and hopefully we've all learned a little from how we can do that as leaders better as we move forward.
Great, thank you so much, Liz. Yeah, and I remember in the particularly beginning days of the pandemic, and the phrase was work from home if you can, wasn't it? And I remember conversations, I was at a previous employer then, just the sort of tail end of, so the beginning of the lockdowns, on my tail end of my job there, and there was a question about, you know, how that was defined, and, you know, could we include things like people who perhaps would have mental health challenges if they were isolated for a long period of time, and so on. So yeah, you know, kind of good to hear that L&G could support that in the last 18 months. Thank you. Cool. Well, thank you everyone for your thoughts on that topic, for sure. Again, you know, coming back to the theme of it, it's the pandemic accelerating things that perhaps were starting to happen anyway. I know almost every organisation I speak to now has an employee assistance programme, whereas I sort of think beforehand they were perhaps a little rarer, whereas now I don't think people would be taking roles with organisations that didn't. So that, you know, that's got to be a good thing for sure. So the question that I'd like to come to now has actually been posed by Plus Accounting. Hi, Plus. So with regard to the question about flexible working, do you see this staying in place forever? This is a question to each of you. And if you own office space, are you looking to diversify that for other activities or reduce your footprint going forward? I'll kick that off actually. With regard to flexible working, I think the world's changed. It was not a big part of MPB's working practices before. We were sort of happy, everybody was happy to come into the office and spend time together because it was a small company, but we've grown and the world has changed. So I would be very surprised if that changes back now that everyone's got the habit of working and collaborating in a hybrid way. Regarding office space, our company has grown a lot, moved basically tripled in terms of Brighton itself. So we've actually taken on additional office space, but we took on a building across the road from where we are and specifically kitted it out for collaboration rooms. So whereas perhaps in the past we might have put a lot of desks in there, actually we didn't put any desks. We put lots and lots and lots of rooms and whiteboards and screens, and it's been a pleasure to use for sure. You know, has anyone else on the panel kind of got anything to share with regard to the change in office space? Liz, what would you like to share?
Yeah, and again, probably touched on this earlier. We're actually looking, so within our Hove campus, we're looking at all the floors. We have 2 buildings there, so we're not growing our space. We're just making it work better for us. There will be less desks and much more collaboration space. Again, we'd started to do this in some ways, but nowhere near as much as we're going to do. Over in Cardiff, which is another location, we are blessed with the fact a new building is currently under construction. And to any of our colleagues who work in Cardiff, they're very excited about that. But again, that isn't going to be full of desks on every floor. That, you know, we're designing that space to reflect the hybrid way of working as we move forward.
Cool. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, I think, you know, this is, again, probably a similar theme for many of us. So sort of mindful of time now, and I'd like to start wrapping up the event. It's been lovely to talk with you all and get some new ideas and kind of, you know, see what we're doing similarly and differently and so on. On which kind of note, I'm going to come to each of you in turn to do with your biggest learning. So think about everything we've talked about and think about, you know, you as a leader. What's been your personal biggest learning in the last 18 months? Could be something we've talked about or something else. So just a kind of short wrap up from each of you, please. Emma, perhaps we can come to you first, please.
It's a big question. I think maybe the biggest thing that I've learned is that I can be vulnerable rather than being a superhuman as a leader. To show all facets of myself is not a sign of weakness. In fact, it's a sign of strength.
Wow, that's great. Love it. That's brilliant. Luke, what about you, please?
Yeah, pretty much. Emma stole the thunder. Yeah, pretty much the same. I think, you know, that as you can't do everything. I think that's what I've learned, is that you can't do everything, but there's a lot of people to support you, and everyone feels that way. And if you're clear and open about your strengths and where other people's strengths are, you just come together as a better team. I think communication, for all the difficulties of being remote, it's shown how valuable it is to all of us to make our businesses successful. And talking and giving time to conversation. We have a thing that we're constantly talking to our business about. There is never a bad conversation. There's always something learned from a conversation, to have it, and that's, you know, that's more now than ever before.
Thank you, Luke. That's great. Liz, what about you, please?
I think I'd echo much of what I've just heard, but I think in terms of what I learnt personally through the experience was I had fairly fixed views about my desire to have everybody in the office and working collaboratively, and, you know, and I learnt how easily I and my team could adapt, how we could learn and be creative and do the same things in a different way. But more importantly, that spread across the organisation. Everybody was focused on getting everybody to be able to work remotely and everybody feel okay about what they were doing, and we achieved it. And for me, that was my biggest learning.
Thank you. Apologies if our listeners, people on the line, if it's the internet's going in and out. A few of us are having a few connection problems, luckily right at the end. Bex, over to you, please, on your biggest learning.
Sure. So I think the biggest thing for me is just been noticing what was missing in that kind of connective tissue in the office, in those little informal interactions. And I noticed that if you sort of leave a meeting with a slightly different, everyone having a slightly different opinion about, or different viewpoint on what's been decided, that's harder to kind of catch in a remote world, because there won't be an informal chat afterwards. We go, oh no, that's not what I thought. So I think that the biggest learning is sort of not to make any assumptions that everyone's leaving the room with the same opinion. It's like worth being really explicit, like at the end of every meeting, what have we agreed here today, even if it feels a bit repetitive, what are we going to do next, and kind of like have that laid out, because those things are a little bit more likely to drop through the cracks in a remote world. So that's a new practice.
That's great, thank you. So we're going to wrap up now, but before I do, I'll share my biggest learning as well. I think it's sort of ending on a positive note, which we've tried to kind of inculcate throughout today's conversation, you know, is really how resilient human beings are. So I've learned myself how I'm more resilient than I thought I was. We've all had a very tough time at many levels, haven't we, over the last 18 months, and actually surprised myself by how myself and my family got through it so well. And also, just with regard to humans, I think it is such an unprecedented set of events, and yet human beings have pulled together and solved these problems. So I think it's actually, although I don't mean to in any way kind of talk down the effect that the last 18 months has had on many people on many levels, actually is that theme of resiliency, which I take as a positive takeaway from it. So on that note, I'd like to thank you all for joining. It was really lovely to meet all four of you, like really great to hear from you all and so on. Yeah, thank you to WiredSussex for hosting this event. So Rifa, over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you as well to Sophie for hosting so brilliantly, and thank you to Luke and Emma and Liz and Bex for giving your time to Wired Sussex, and to everybody who's watching on the live stream. We've got another leadership event coming up on Thursday at 1 o'clock. We'll put the link in the chat. This one's around diversity. We've got a brilliant panel, and tomorrow we've got a meet the team with MPB, which is open to everybody to come along at 1 o'clock. Again, you'll meet some of the team members of MPB, find out what they do, and that's going to be really exciting as well. So you can check out all of those events at wiredsussex.com/events. Thank you all so much. See you soon.